He stood before the judge laughing as he called his wife a lazy, overweight burden who contributed absolutely nothing to their marriage. He thought he was walking away with everything. He didn't know the woman quietly weeping across the courtroom was about to strip away his job, his fortune, and his entire reality. Courtroom 302 of the Cook County Family Court in downtown Chicago was normally a place of quiet, bureaucratic misery. But today the tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. The overcast October sky cast a pale, unforgiving light through the tall windows, illuminating the stark contrast between the two people sitting at the opposing mahogany tables. At the petitioner's table sat Richard Harrison. He was the picture of corporate perfection, a 42-year-old senior vice president at Meridian Tech, clad in a bespoke charcoal Tom Ford suit that hugged his lean, gym-honed frame. A vintage Patek Philippe watch peeked out from his pristine French cuffs, catching the fluorescent lights every time he adjusted his posture. He carried himself with the effortless arrogance of a man who believed the world was an oyster served exclusively on his silver platter. 2 rows behind him in the gallery sat Chloe Adams, his 26-year-old mistress, or as Richard publicly referred to her, his life strategist. She sat with her legs crossed, filing her nails, occasionally shooting venomous, triumphant smirks across the aisle. At the respondent's table sat Evelyn Harrison. To anyone looking, she appeared entirely defeated. She was swallowed by a bulky, oversized navy blue cashmere sweater. Her posture slumped, her eyes fixed firmly on her lap. Over the past 5 years, Evelyn had gained nearly 70 pounds. She had traded the glamorous, high-maintenance aesthetic Richard demanded for comfortable clothes and quiet days spent locked in their estate's guest bedroom, typing furiously on her laptop. Richard had spent those 5 years reminding her of her physical changes, weaponizing her weight to justify his infidelities, his emotional absence, and ultimately this brutal divorce. Presiding over the carnage was the Honorable Judge Patricia Holden, a no-nonsense veteran of family law who peered over her reading glasses with a weary expression. She had seen messy divorces, but the sheer lack of grace radiating from Richard Harrison was testing her legendary patience. Mr. Walsh, you may continue your direct examination of your client. Judge Holden instructed, her voice echoing in the cavernous room. Bradley Walsh. Richard's high-priced, slick-haired attorney stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. Thank you, Your Honor. Walsh paced slowly toward the witness stand, where Richard was already seated, looking as comfortable as if he were holding court in a boardroom. Mr. Harrison, let's return to the matter of the Lake Forest estate. Walsh began smoothly. Your wife's counsel has requested a 50% split of the property's equity, as well as a significant portion of your stock options at Meridian Tech. Could you explain to the court why you feel this is disproportionate? Richard chuckled, a dry, condescending sound that made Evelyn flinch visibly. She reached up to wipe a stray tear from her cheek. Disproportionate is a polite word for it, Brad, Richard said, leaning into the microphone. It's extortion. When I met Evelyn 8 years ago, she was a barista, struggling to pay rent in a studio apartment in Logan Square. I brought her into my world. I gave her a life of luxury. And how did she repay me? He paused, shooting a look of pure disgust at his wife. She gave up. She stopped taking care of herself. She stopped attending corporate galas with me because she couldn't fit into the dresses, and frankly, she became an embarrassment to my public image. My career relies on optics, Your Honor. Judge Holden frowned. Mr. Harrison, your wife's physical appearance has little bearing on the equitable distribution of marital assets under Illinois law. With respect, Your Honor, it speaks to her contribution to the marriage or lack thereof, Walsh interjected smoothly. Mr. Harrison has worked 80-hour weeks to build his portfolio. Meanwhile, Mrs. Harrison has spent the last 5 years ordering Uber Eats, refusing to maintain the household, and locking herself in a guest room playing on the internet. She hasn't held a job in 8 years. She has contributed 0 financial capital to this union. Why should she walk away with half of a fortune she actively slept through? At her table, Evelyn let out a soft, shuddering breath. Her attorney, Samantha Reed, sat beside her. Unlike Walsh, who was all theatrical pacing and loud objections, Samantha was entirely motionless. A sharp, brilliant woman in her late 40s, Samantha wore a simple black suit and an expression of eerie, unshakable calm. She hadn't raised a single objection during Richard's 15-minute character assassination of her client. She just sat there, her manicured fingers resting lightly on a closed leather binder. "I had to outsource everything." Richard continued playing the victim with practiced ease. "I hired a private chef because she wouldn't cook. I hired a maid because she wouldn't clean. I even had to hire outside companionship." He gestured vaguely toward the gallery where Chloe beamed. "Because my wife ceased to function as a partner. I am the sole breadwinner. I am the reason there is any money to divide. I am willing to offer her a generous lump sum of $200,000 to start a new life. But she does not deserve my house, and she certainly doesn't deserve my Meridian Tech stock." Richard leaned back, looking incredibly pleased with himself. He had painted the perfect picture of the aggrieved, hard-working executive chained to a lazy, ungrateful burden. Evelyn buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. To the untrained eye, she was crying out of shame and heartbreak, but Samantha Reed leaned over, whispering so quietly that only Evelyn could hear. "Are you ready to end this?" Samantha asked. Evelyn didn't look up, but from behind her hands, she gave a single, microscopic nod. The trembling in her shoulders wasn't just sorrow. It was the physical manifestation of keeping a 5-year secret from tearing its way out of her chest. "Nothing further for this witness, Your Honor," Walsh said, taking his seat with a triumphant smirk. Judge Holden turned her gaze to the respondent's table. "Ms. Reed, do you wish to cross-examine?" Samantha Reed stood up. She didn't rush. She picked up her leather binder, adjusted her glasses, and walked to the center of the courtroom. The air in the room seemed to shift, the atmospheric pressure dropping as she locked eyes with Richard Harrison. "Yes, Your Honor. I have a few questions for Mr. Harrison." Samantha Reed approached the podium, laying her binder flat on the wood. She looked up at Richard, who was smiling at her with a mixture of pity and condescension. He assumed Samantha was a discount lawyer Evelyn had scraped together, using what little allowance he had left in their joint checking account. "Mr. Harrison," Samantha began, her voice crisp and clear, cutting through the silence of the courtroom. "You've painted quite a vivid picture of your wife's inactivity. You stated under oath that she has contributed 0 financial capital to your marriage. Is that correct?" "That is correct," Richard replied, adjusting his cuffs. "I pay for everything." "And you also stated that you are a senior vice president at Meridian Tech, a position you claim is the sole source of your vast marital wealth." "It is." "Let's talk about Meridian Tech," Samantha said, opening her binder. "It's my understanding that the company is currently in the final stages of a massive corporate buyout. Is that true?" Walsh jumped up. "Objection, Your Honor. Relevance. The internal corporate dealings of Meridian Tech are strictly confidential and have no bearing on this divorce proceeding other than the valuation of the stock already submitted into evidence." "Your Honor, I assure you it is highly relevant to the valuation of the marital assets and Mr. Harrison's testimony regarding his financial supremacy," Samantha countered smoothly. "Overruled." But keep it tight, Ms. Reed, Judge Holden warned. Thank you. Samantha turned back to Richard. Mr. Harrison, your company is being acquired by a private conglomerate known as Apex Dynamics. This acquisition will effectively triple the value of your unvested stock options, pushing your net worth from roughly $12 million to over $40 million. Is this the reason you filed for divorce 2 months before the acquisition goes public? Richard's jaw tightened slightly, a flicker of genuine annoyance breaking his calm facade. I filed for divorce because my marriage was dead, Miss Reed. The timing of the acquisition is purely coincidental. Coincidental? Samantha repeated, letting the word hang in the air. I see. And you are quite proud of your position at Meridian. You feel you are indispensable to the merger. I brokered half the deal. Richard bragged, unable to resist stroking his own ego. I've been in closed-door meetings with the Apex Dynamics acquisition team for 6 months. I am the linchpin of the transition. Have you ever met the CEO of Apex Dynamics? Samantha asked casually. Richard scoffed. No one has. The founder and majority shareholder goes by the initials EC and operates entirely through proxy boards and legal representatives. It's a well-known fact in the tech industry. The CEO is a recluse. What does this have to do with my lazy wife? Samantha ignored the insult. So you are staking your entire $40 million future on an acquisition by a company whose CEO you have never met, run by a person you know nothing about. I know their capital is green, Richard sneered, drawing a few snickers from his mistress in the gallery. That's all I need to know. Now, if we are done discussing my career, I'd like to finalize this divorce so I can get back to the office. We are just getting started on your career, Mr. Harrison, Samantha said coldly. She pulled a thick stack of stapled papers from her binder. Your Honor, I would like to submit Exhibit D into evidence. Copies have just been provided to opposing counsel. Walsh picked up the document on his desk, his eyes scanning the first page. Suddenly the smugness vanished from his face. The color drained from his cheeks so fast he looked as though he had been struck by lightning. Your Honor, what is this objection? This is fabricated. What is it, Mr. Walsh, Judge Holden asked, putting on her glasses and looking at the copy the bailiff handed her. It is a legally binding corporate charter and majority shareholder disclosure form for Apex Dynamics, filed under seal with the SEC. Samantha stated, her voice ringing with absolute authority. Unsealed this morning by a federal judge at my client's request. Richard leaned forward, his brow furrowing. What are you talking about? How did you get SEC documents regarding Apex? Samantha didn't look at Richard. She looked at Evelyn. Evelyn Harrison slowly stood up from the respondents' table. She wasn't crying anymore. The slump in her shoulders was gone. She reached up, wiped the last remnant of tears from her face, and looked directly at her husband. Her eyes, usually soft and pleading, were now sharp as cut glass. Mr. Harrison, Samantha said, turning her attention back to the witness stand. You testified that your wife spent the last 5 years doing nothing but sitting in her guest room on her laptop. You assumed she was playing on the internet. But if you had ever bothered to look at her screen, you would have noticed she was building a digital logistics empire. An empire that recently expanded into corporate acquisitions. That's insane. Richard spat, his voice trembling slightly. She's a barista. She's a nobody, Your Honor, Samantha said, pointing to the document. If you look at page 4, section 2B, you will see the unmasked identity of the majority shareholder and acting CEO of Apex Dynamics, The elusive EC. Judge Holden flipped the page. She read the line once. Then she read it again. She looked up, her jaw slightly slack, staring at Evelyn. "Mr. Walsh," the judge said, her voice dropping an octave. "Has your client read this?" "Aye. Your Honor, we need a recess. We need to verify the authenticity," Walsh stammered, panic sweating through his designer suit. "I want to know what it says," Richard demanded, gripping the edges of the witness stand. "What does it say?" Samantha Reed walked right up to the stand and slammed her copy of the document down in front of Richard. "It says, Mr. Harrison, that EC stands for Evelyn Croft, your wife's maiden name. It says that the lazy, overweight burden you just spent 20 minutes mocking is the sole founder, CEO, and 82% shareholder of Apex Dynamics." Samantha leaned in her voice, dropping to a lethal whisper. "It says, Richard, that she is the one buying your company, and you just gave her the absolute right to fire you." The silence in courtroom 302 was absolute, heavy and suffocating. It was the kind of silence that follows a catastrophic explosion right before the shockwave hits. Richard Harrison stared at the document in front of him, the letters blurring together. He blinked rapidly, his mind desperately trying to reject the reality sitting on the polished mahogany ledge. He looked from the paper to Samantha Reed, then to his wife. "This is a forgery," Richard whispered, though his voice lacked its usual booming authority. It sounded thin, reedy, like a man gasping for air. "This is a pathetic, desperate forgery. You printed this out to scare me. Evelyn can barely operate a microwave, let alone a global tech conglomerate. The seal in the top right corner is from the Securities and Exchange Commission. Mr. Harrison." Samantha replied, her tone perfectly even. "And the watermark is from the federal court that unsealed it at 8 o'clock this morning. But if you require further verification, perhaps you should check your phone. I imagine your board of directors is trying to reach you right now." As if on cue, a muffled, frantic buzzing began to emanate from Richard's breast pocket. Then Bradley Walsh's phone started ringing on the petitioner's table. In the gallery, Chloe Adams stopped filing her nails, her heavily glossed lips parting in sudden confusion as the atmosphere in the room violently shifted. Richard slowly pulled his phone from his pocket. The screen was lit up with dozens of missed calls and frantic text messages from the Meridian Tech Executive Board. One text, previewed on the lock screen from the company's chief financial officer, read, "Richard, what did you do? Apex just filed the restructuring paperwork. They're liquidating your division." The color drained from Richard's face, leaving him a sickening shade of gray. His phone slipped from his trembling fingers and clattered onto the floor. Evelyn walked slowly from her table toward the center of the room. She didn't look like the broken, defeated woman who had walked in 2 hours ago. As she pulled the oversized navy cashmere sweater over her head, she revealed a tailored, impeccably cut, slate-gray blazer and silk blouse underneath. The transformation was instantaneous and jarring. She wasn't slouching anymore. She stood tall, her posture radiating an intimidating, quiet power. "You spent the last 5 years telling me I was worthless, Richard," Evelyn said, her voice echoing clearly in the quiet courtroom. She didn't yell. She didn't need to. "You told me my weight made me invisible. You told me that if I wasn't serving you, cooking for you, or acting as your arm candy at corporate dinners, I simply didn't exist. So I took your advice. I became invisible." "How?" Richard choked out, gripping the wooden railing of the witness box so hard his knuckles turned white. "How could you possibly build a logistics empire from a guest bedroom?" "Because the tech industry doesn't care what size dress you wear, Richard. It only cares about the code. while you were out wining and dining clients and spending your weekends at expensive hotels with your life strategist. Evelyn cast a brief, withering glance at Chloe, who shrank back into her seat. I was coding. I built a predictive algorithm for global supply chains. I sold the patent for my first software to a European firm for $20 million 3 years ago. I used that capital to found Apex Dynamics. Walsh, desperately trying to salvage his massive contingency fee and his client's ruined case, shot up from his chair. Your Honor, even if this absurd fairy tale is true, it changes nothing fundamentally about the division of assets they are legally married. Under Illinois law, any business created during the marriage is a marital asset. If she is the CEO and founder of Apex Dynamics, then my client is entitled to 50% of it. We will take half her company. Richard's eyes widened, a sudden desperate spark of hope igniting in his chest. Walsh was right. If she was worth billions, he was about to become unimaginably wealthy. He wouldn't just survive this, he would win. But Samantha Reed didn't flinch. Instead, she offered Walsh a smile that was nothing short of predatory. Mr. Walsh, Samantha said, slowly pacing back to her table and picking up another file. It seems you haven't reviewed the full scope of your client's marital history, specifically the post-nuptial agreement, signed exactly 3.5 years ago. Richard's fleeting hope vanished, replaced by a cold, paralyzing dread. Your Honor, I am submitting Exhibit F, Samantha announced, handing the documents to the bailiff. 3.5 years ago, Mr. Harrison received his promotion to Senior Vice President at Meridian Tech. He was anticipating a massive influx of stock options. In his infinite greed, he forced his wife to sign a post-nuptial agreement under the threat of immediate divorce and eviction. Evelyn looked at Richard, her eyes flashing with a fierce, vindicated fire. You told me that you were tired of me mooching off your brilliance, she reminded him softly. You said I was dead weight, and you refused to let me touch your precious future earnings. The post-nuptial agreement, Samantha continued, addressing the judge, contains a very specific ironclad clause drafted by Mr. Harrison's former attorneys. It stipulates that any business entity founded, incorporated, or acquired by either party after the date of signing shall remain the sole and exclusive property of the founder, entirely exempt from marital division. Judge Holden read over the document, a slow, satisfied smirk pulling at the corner of her mouth. A very thoroughly drafted clause, Mr. Walsh. Your client completely insulated himself from his wife's future earnings. He thought he was protecting his Meridian stock from me, Evelyn explained to the court. He didn't realize I incorporated Apex Dynamics 3 weeks after I signed his post-nup. He'd legally walled himself off from my entire empire. Walsh slumped back into his chair, dropping his pen. He was looking at Richard not as a client, but as a dead man walking. You planned this, Richard stammered, staring at his wife as if she were a monster he had never seen before. You orchestrated this whole thing. I survived you, Richard, Evelyn corrected coldly. I endured your emotional abuse, your mocking, your cruelty, and I used the silence you forced me into to build a kingdom you could never touch. Be that as it may, Richard suddenly sneered, a feral, cornered look crossing his face. He puffed out his chest, trying to summon the arrogance that had defined his entire life. You can keep your company, Evelyn. I don't care. Meridian Tech is still being acquired. The buyout is locked in. My unvested stock options will vest upon the sale. I'm walking away with $40 million. I'm still rich, and I'm still leaving you. Evelyn actually laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound that echoed off the high ceiling of the courtroom. "Oh, Richard, you really don't understand how corporate acquisitions work, do you?" she said, shaking her head pityingly. "When a parent company buys a subsidiary, they don't just hand over blank checks. They conduct a phase called due diligence, a period where the acquiring CEO has unrestricted absolute access to the internal financial ledgers, private emails, and corporate accounts of the company they are purchasing." Richard froze. The arrogant puff of his chest deflated instantly. "When Apex Dynamics initiated the buyout of Meridian Tech, I hired an elite team of forensic accountants to review the executive division." Evelyn said, her voice turning lethal. "I wanted to see exactly how you were funding your extravagant lifestyle while cutting off my grocery allowance." Samantha Reed handed a thick, red-bound folder to the judge. "Your Honor, Exhibit G. The forensic audit of Richard Harrison's corporate accounts. What the audit uncovered was a systematic, highly sophisticated embezzlement scheme." "Objection, defamation." "You can't just," Walsh yelled, but Judge Holden slammed her gavel down so hard it echoed like a gunshot. "Sit down, Mr. Walsh, before I hold you in contempt," Judge Holden barked, her eyes scanning the audit. "Ms. Reed, continue. Over the past 4 years, Mr. Harrison has siphoned approximately $3.2 million from Meridian Tech's development fund," Samantha stated clearly. "He routed the money through a series of shell vendors to pay for a luxury penthouse apartment in the Gold Coast neighborhood, a 2024 Porsche 911, and over $400,000 in diamond jewelry." Evelyn turned and looked directly at Chloe Adams, who was now gripping her designer handbag with white-knuckled terror, all of which coincidentally are registered under the name Chloe Adams. Every eye in the courtroom shifted to the young mistress. Chloe shrank down in her seat, looking frantically at the exit doors. "The $200,000 generous lump sum my husband offered me today." Evelyn continued, turning back to the judge. "That was stolen Meridian capital he was trying to wash through the divorce settlement." You can't prove any of this." Richard gasped, though the heavy sweat pouring down his forehead betrayed him. He looked like a man standing on the gallows, watching the lever being pulled. "I don't need to prove it here, Richard," Evelyn said softly. "This is family court. But as the acting CEO of Meridian Tech's new parent company, it was my legal obligation to report internal theft to the authorities. I forwarded the forensic audit to the FBI and the Securities and Exchange Commission 48 hours ago." As if the universe itself were scripting the timing, the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. 2 men wearing dark suits and stern expressions walked in flashing federal badges to the bailiff. "Richard Harrison," the lead agent asked, his voice cutting through the silent room. Richard didn't answer. He couldn't. His legs gave out and he collapsed back into the wooden witness chair, his manicured hands trembling uncontrollably. His $40 million buyout was gone. His job was gone. His freedom was about to be stripped away. In the gallery, Chloe Adams didn't wait for the agents to approach. She stood up, completely abandoning her life strategist persona, and bolted for the side exit, leaving Richard to his fate without a backward glance. Judge Holden took off her glasses and looked down at Richard with absolute disgust. "Mr. Harrison," the judge said, her voice dripping with contempt, "in my 20 years on the bench, I have rarely seen a man dig his own grave with such aggressive enthusiasm. I am granting the respondent's petition for divorce on the grounds of extreme cruelty and marital fault. Mrs. Harrison retains full and sole ownership of Apex Dynamics and all affiliated assets as per your own post-nuptial agreement. I am denying your request for alimony and ordering you to pay all of her attorney's fees. Though given the gentleman waiting at the back of my courtroom, I suspect legal fees will soon be the least of your financial worries." Judge Holden slammed her gavel down one final time. "We are adjourned." Evelyn didn't wait to watch the federal agents approach the witness stand. She didn't need to see Richard cry, nor did she need to hear his desperate, pathetic apologies as they placed him in handcuffs. She had already given him 5 years of her life. He wasn't getting another second. She turned away, walked through the swinging wooden gates, and met Samantha Reed at the aisle. The two women exchanged a brief, triumphant nod. Evelyn pushed through the heavy courtroom doors and stepped out into the hallway. The October air outside the courthouse was crisp and cold, but as Evelyn walked down the marble steps toward the waiting black town car, she felt warmer, lighter, and more powerful than she ever had in her entire life. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was the architect of her own empire and the architect of his absolute ruin. If this story of absolute karma and ultimate revenge kept you on the edge of your seat, you are not going to want to miss what we have coming next. Hit that like button, share this incredible story with anyone who loves seeing a toxic narcissist get exactly what they deserve, and make sure to subscribe to our channel for more jaw-dropping, real-life courtroom dramas. Ring the notification bell so you never miss a twist. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.